Welcome back to This is Baseball. I am Brandon Johnson. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. I hope that everybody's holiday season was fantastic. I am very, very excited to be back on this microphone hosting This is Baseball again in 2025. Thank you so much for listening today. If you've been here for a while, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time with us, I hope you stick around and like the show. So, obviously, I took a couple of months off of This is Baseball. Very much needed break for me. I kind of talked about it in my final episode of 2024 that came out in November. It had been about 18 months of consistently uploading episodes weekly, other than, a few weeks where I was away. And after the 2024 season wrapped, it felt like a natural point in this podcast to go ahead and take a break. The season had just ended. Holiday season was about to wrap up, and I was ready to take a break and kind of just get away from the show for a little bit, and at the same time think about the future and what I want this show to look like in 2025 and beyond. And to kind of get into my thought process, and just I like to be transparent, it was last off season, so in between 2023 and 2024, I was uploading episodes every other week and just kind of doing whatever I wanted in the field of baseball. I was talking about hypotheticals or history or rule changes or just things that I would like to see. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the freedom of it. I enjoyed not feeling like I was having to really keep up with what was going on like I have to when I am publishing episodes during the regular season. During the regular season, there's a lot going on and a lot of news, a lot of games. Just obviously with baseball being an everyday sport during the summer, it can get pretty hard to keep up. And I didn't like kind of feeling behind on the current news. I was kind of going through the season and hit really August of 2024, and I was like, you know what? I'm thinking about the off season, and I really enjoyed the freedom that I had during the off season of just recording, episodes every other week and talking about what I wanted. So I knew in August that I would be taking a break after the 2024 season wrapped, so I could prepare for kind of what I'm calling the new era of This is Baseball, where moving forward, I am going to be publishing episodes every other week, and that's going to be indefinite. I know if you've been here for a while, during the season I was doing episodes weekly. For now, the plan is to just indefinitely do episodes every other week for you. And the reason for that, like I mentioned earlier, I really love the freedom of just kind of talking about anything and everything about baseball. It doesn't necessarily have to be something current happening. My episodes, I don't want my episodes to be time sensitive or, I publish an episode and, it's irrelevant 2 weeks later because a lot of different things that happen. I want my episodes to have some staying power, if that makes sense. I want to, if I release an episode today, I want, if somebody finds my podcast, they are looking through old episodes a year and a half from now, I want them to be able to listen to that and still feel like that information can still be relevant, even though there might be, some updates to that, or maybe my feelings have changed on that topic. But, I want my old episodes to have longevity. And I think the best way to do that is for me to walk away from trying to keep up with the current baseball landscape and just dive into a lot of different things that are interesting to me. I am excited to jump into those. Like this episode today, I'm going to be diving into kind of these mega deals and are they good for the sport of baseball? And then I have just a bunch of other things planned. My thoughts on analytics, what's the state of baseball now that we have a good sample of the current postseason format. Is that working? Should they consider tweaks to it? And just diving into history. And, I might talk about things that have been talked about on other podcasts, YouTube channels, TV shows, whatever. But my goal is going to be to bring you, a unique kind of angle of whatever that topic may be. So that's kind of my goal, and that's what I'm excited about. And I think doing this will give me more time to build episodes and give you better episodes and longer episodes that I can be really proud of. So that being said, that's kind of where my head's at. Now, I will say I'm not going to just abandon the current baseball landscape. There will be times where I will absolutely jump in and talk about things that I want to, give my opinion of. I will still give my annual regular season opening day predictions of what I think is going to happen. I'll do monthly or quarterly episodes about the regular season and just kind of give my piece to make sure I'm staying up to date and keeping, you guys up to date on that as well. So not going away from that completely, but it's not going to be a weekly occurrence of me sitting down and kind of giving you, what I would, if I looked back at it, kind of the highlights of, the previous week. So that is the plan for This Is Baseball. All right. Now that we've got all that out of the way, I wanted to get into today's episode. Now, I briefly mentioned it earlier in the show, but today's episode is kind of focusing on mega contracts. Now, the Mets signing Juan Soto to the $765 million deal, and Shohei Ohtani signing his $700 million deal with the Dodgers last year is kind of what stemmed, the ideas for this episode. But I don't want to focus on Soto or Shohei today. What I want to look at is what I think are 5 of the worst mega contracts in MLB. Now, this is my list. Your list may be different, but these are some contracts that I want to highlight. Now, all of these have been within the last 15 years, so there may be some before that you look at that maybe didn't quite live up to what you thought they would. But for me, this is my list, 5 of the worst mega contracts in MLB history. And honestly, this list is in no particular order. It was just kind of the players that I thought of first. So let's go ahead and get into this thing. The first player on my list, and honestly, this pains me that this is like one of the first players that I thought of, but Albert Pujols is the first player I'm going to talk about on this list. Now, Albert Pujols, I was born in 1996. Albert Pujols dominated the MLB in the 2000s, right? He was with those really good Cardinals teams that were perennial World Series contenders. And honestly, I think he's the best hitter of his generation and one of the 5 greatest hitters of all time, right? So, you're looking at his time with the Cardinals, and he won Rookie of the Year in 2001. He won 3 MVPs. He was a 9-time All-Star. He won 6 Silver Sluggers and 2 Gold Gloves. On top of that, he was a 2-time World Series champion. in 2006 and 2011. So, in his time with the Cardinals from 2001 to 2011, he had already played a Hall of Fame career. And he had signed a second contract with the St. Louis Cardinals at the time. But, now it was time for him to hit the free agent market. Tony La Russa, longtime Cardinals manager, was retiring as well. So I think it just felt natural for Pujols to move on. So, obviously all 30 teams in the league are going to have some sort of interest in Albert Pujols, whether it's realistic to sign him or not. The Angels obviously ended up being the team that signed Albert Pujols to a 10-year, $240 million deal. And honestly, at the time, you're like, okay, Albert Pujols, who I, again, said is the greatest hitter of his generation, paired with Mike Trout, who just came off of a phenomenal year and is going to be a perfect pairing for Albert Pujols. You have that 1-2 punch of Pujols and Trout, and you're starting to think, wow, that's really good for the Angels. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the AL West and probably the AL as a whole, right? And honestly, if you were just to look at the first 5 years of Albert Pujols' time in Los Angeles with the Angels, you would go, oh, he was pretty good. He was still hitting for average. He was still hitting for power. He was driving in a lot of runs. But there was never really team success for the Angels with him there outside of in 2014 when that Angels team won 98 games and was, the number one team in the American League, and they ended up getting swept in the division round by the Kansas City Royals. But, after 2017, his average started to dip. He was a below 250 hitter, and the power was going away. He was still driving in runs somewhat, but really just kind of fell off a cliff. In age really got the better of him. He ends up getting let go by the Angels in 2021. He spent some time with the Dodgers and comes back in 2022 and spends time with the Cardinals and closes out his career with the Cardinals and gets that 700th home run that everybody wanted him to get. But when you're the Angels and you sign a guy like Pujols, you hope that, okay, we have Pujols here, we see what he did, and you hope that can be replicated in Los Angeles. Now, obviously, baseball is a team sport where, I think it's one sport where a player can't just put the team on his back because he only has so many opportunities at the plate. Angels have just kind of been a mediocre or disappointing franchise. They're a team that just didn't win a lot of games. We're kind of a 500 team throughout Pujols' time there, and it just didn't work out. Now, with all that being said, Albert Pujols, when his time comes, is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer easily. He's, again, just one of the best players of his generation. But let's move on to Pablo Sandoval is next on my list. Now, you remember Pablo Sandoval. He's on the San Francisco Giants. He's the third baseman. He's the panda. He's a fan favorite in San Francisco. Everybody loved him. So after the Giants won the World Series in 2014 in 7 games over the Royals, Pablo Sandoval gets to be a free agent. And honestly, when he was with the Giants, he had a serviceable bat and a pretty decent glove. Honestly, Pablo Sandoval's biggest issue was him being able to stay in baseball shape. So fast forward, Pablo Sandoval signs with the Red Sox. He signs a 5-year deal for $95 million with them, and honestly is kind of immediately terrible. He posted his worst career numbers at the plate in 2015 under the first year of his deal. He missed the entire 2016 due to injury. He showed up to spring training completely out of shape and just was never in game shape. In fact, the Red Sox gave up on him in 2017, and he ended up going back to the Giants, and the Giants ended up basically taking in half of that deal. And honestly, Pablo Sandoval's time with the Red Sox, I think, is mostly remembered by his bat breaking in the middle of that at bat. He swung and his belt just popped, basically, just because he was too heavy. And it's unfortunate because, you look at his time with the Giants, he was a really solid player, right? Not a Hall of Fame caliber player, but you knew he was going to hit for average. You knew he was going to be a decent fielder. And honestly, as soon as he left, he posted a negative career WAR. So yeah, for Pablo Sandoval, I don't think that there was any part of that deal with the Boston Red Sox that Boston is happy about. With some of these guys, well, at least we got productivity out of him. We just didn't, have the team success that we would have liked to have. With Pablo Sandoval, it was just all bad almost immediately. But that brings me to my third player on my list, and that is Chris Davis of the Baltimore Orioles. So I think we all remember Chris Davis in kind of the early 2010s, right? He was a player that was almost must-see TV because he had the ability to hit a ball to the moon basically every time he was at the plate. In 2013, he had 53 home runs and 138 RBIs, which obviously led the league. And he was just consistently like that in the early 2010s. So Chris Davis being able to not only hit for average but hit for power, the Orioles were in a pretty good spot as a franchise in 2013, 2014, 2015. They were starting to compete. They made the playoffs. So you want to make sure that Chris Davis is going to be part of your team's core, which makes all the sense in the world, right? So after the 2015 season, Chris Davis and the Baltimore Orioles agreed to a $160 million deal over 7 years. And in the first year of his deal, he led the league in strikeouts, and this kind of started happening the year prior. He was, starting to strike out a ton. But his power numbers started to dip. His productivity as far as driving and runs started to dip. His average was just fell off a cliff, basically. And he just almost immediately, if you have a player that can hit a ball a mile anytime they're up to the plate, but they have the same, it's a 50-50 shot that they're going to strike out as well, you can kind of work with that. But when you're going to strike out a ton and then stop hitting the baseball, stop hitting for power, it gets really bad really quick. So Chris Davis, just for somebody that was so electric and exciting to watch during his, early 2010s with the Orioles, just kind of fell off a cliff, and you were honestly man, what happened to that guy? And, he played a little bit in 2020 with Baltimore, and then the league hasn't seen him since. All right, now let's hop into the fourth player on my list. And this is an interesting one, and I was a little bit hesitant to put him on my list, but I kept going back to him, so I put him here. And it is Robinson Cano. Robinson Cano's 10-year, $240 million deal with the Seattle Mariners. And I think what's interesting about that is, when Cano signed with the Mariners, he was a player that, was a 6-time All-Star. He was one of the best second basemen in the league. He was part of a championship team in 2009 with the Yankees. Super fun player to watch. Everything he did on defense, he made look very easy. So obviously a lot of players or a lot of teams would want that. And you would think that, maybe the Yankees would jump into that or the Dodgers would be in on that. But it was surprising and refreshing that the Mariners kind of won the Robinson Cano sweepstakes and signed him to a huge deal. And this was a point where the Mariners, like, honestly, they had Felix Hernandez, but they weren't really going anywhere. So this was kind of a way for them to feel like they were going in the right direction. And honestly, when I look at Robinson Cano, this contract, I think, is bad for different reasons than productivity. Because if you were to look at it, you're like, oh, Cano was honestly still a pretty good player. Like, he was still hitting for average, still productive as far as driving in runs and hitting for, a little bit of power, as much power as you want your second baseman to have. But the biggest issue with Robinson Cano is the multiple PED suspensions. So he got suspended in 2018 for 80 games. And then again in 2021 for the entire season. Obviously, your first offense for PED usage is 80 games. Your second is getting suspended for an entire year. And then your third offense is being banned from baseball forever. But during the 2018 season, Cano got traded to the Mets. The Mets took over that contract. So basically 2 teams had to deal with this mess. And 2 different teams had him be suspended for, lengthy periods of time due to his own poor decisions. And I think the toughest part about Robinson Cano is he's a player that I think at the time of him signing this deal with the Mariners was kind of on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and probably would have been had he not had the 2 PED suspensions. So really, really kind of unfortunate back half of the career for Robinson Cano. I think he's playing baseball in the Dominican Republic or somewhere right now, still kind of doing his thing, but just unfortunate way for his MLB career to kind of come to an end. Now, let's move on to the final player on my list. And I didn't plan on having current players on this worst mega deal list, but I had to do it. And the next player on my list and the final player on my list of 5 is Anthony Rendon. We got to talk about Anthony Rendon. So in 2020, before the 2020 season, Anthony Rendon signed a 7-year deal with the Los Angeles Angels for $245 million. And Anthony Rendon came up with the Washington Nationals. He was honestly fantastic. He was one of the best third basemen in the league with the Nationals. He played MVP caliber baseball for a long time in Washington. He was a major piece of the 2019 championship that the Washington Nationals won. He was fantastic there. He led the league in RBIs and doubles. He had 126 RBIs, 44 doubles. He hit 320 that season, and just insane numbers. So I can see why the Angels would want to sign Anthony Rendon. And we get to, his contract, his 7-year, $245 million deal that I spoke about. And in the first season, in the, the COVID shortened season, he was solid there, right? But since 2021, Anthony Rendon, due to injury, has not been able to play more than 58 games in a season. So let's just run through this. So 2021, he played 58 games, batted .240. In 2022, he played 47 games, hit .229. 2023, 43 games, .236. 2024, 57 games, .218. So, the old saying of, the best ability is availability. Rendon has been largely unavailable in his time with the Los Angeles Angels. I know you all know that, there's 162 games in a regular season, and he's missing more than 100 of them in any given year. So that's why Anthony Rendon has to be on my list for worst mega deals in Major League Baseball. Because, I mean, $245 million over 7 years, that is a lot of money to have a guy not playing for you for the most part. But honestly, like, if I'm looking at these mega deals, these huge contracts, there's a lot of them that I could have talked about that I didn't want to. There's a lot of current contracts that we're going to need to discuss down the line. You know, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Bobby Witt Jr., Julio Rodriguez. Like, there's a lot of just different players that, like, we need to look at. It's obviously too early to tell for some of these guys whether or not it's worked out, but obviously that'll be something that we can do a little bit down the air. And I mean, if you guys like this type of content, we can do more of some players that, you know, their contracts have already concluded that we can kind of dive into. But honestly, my opinion of these lengthy contracts, I've always been a little bit weary of them. I think for the most part, you're going to see, you know, you sign a player when he's 26 or 27 to a 10 or 15 year deal, and they're probably productive for the first 5, 6, 7 years, depending on the length of it. But, you know, the older they get or the closer to retirement they get, like, it's just natural that, you know, you're going to regress. Like, you're not going to be as productive. You're not going to be as quick. You're not going to be, you know, as good at baseball as you once were. And that's just the way of life. So I think a lot of teams end up having a little bit of buyer's remorse when, you know, these contracts are, especially in the back half of them. And I don't get why they do them. I know, like, if you're looking at, like, let's just talk about Shohei Ohtani. Like, in the first year of his deal, the Dodgers won a championship. Like, that might be enough for the Dodgers to be like, yeah, that was worth it to us, even if they never win it again. But to me, like, just why not just sign, like, shorter deals and, you know, have a way out sooner than you do. But obviously, these players, with the lack of a salary cap in Major League Baseball, are going to get, you know, the most that they possibly can out of a team, and they're typically going to go to the highest bidder. And, you know, that's the game we're playing, so that's what they should do, and that's their right. That's the beauty of being a free agent, is, you know, having the ability to choose where you want to play. But I just think there's a conversation to be had about whether or not this is actually good for baseball at the end of the day. And, you know, that's an episode that we can do in the near future. But that's all I have for you this week on This Is Baseball. Like I said, I'm very excited about what we have in store for This Is Baseball in 2025. I've got a lot of great things planned, a lot of fun episodes that I'm looking forward to doing. And honestly, like, most importantly, I'm just excited to be back. I took, like I said, 2 months off, much needed, ready to kind of get back in the swing of things. And like I said, just mentioned earlier in the show, like, for the foreseeable future, This Is Baseball episodes will be every other Wednesday until I decide I want to do something different with it. I will see you guys in the next one.